Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Matthew, and today we're doing another figure comparison video between two NECAs. Today we have the NECA Godzilla 19. I was about to say 1995. No. This is 2019 Burning Godzilla V3, and this is the NECA Godzilla 2024 Godzilla Evolved, the bootleg figure. Um, this is just going to be again another general figure comparison between the two figures. Uh, Essentially the bootleg versus the original, even though it was copped off V3, this is still an original mold, so yeah. We're going to be primarily taking a look at, the basics, sculpt and paint, articulation, size, accessories, price, availability, and packaging. And essentially, we've got a bit more to talk about this go round because of the differences between him and V2 from last time. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Starting off, the sculpt and paint on the head. Uh, Again, we've been through with the Evolved Godzilla like several times, so we'll just kind of brush through it. Let's start up with the head. The jaw on the of course, the bottom jaw is there, but it's really faded because of how much times the thing was bootlegged. In fact, we don't even know if this was a bootleg of a bootleg or just a bootleg of the original V2. But as you can see, there's little tiny bumps where the teeth were on the bottom jaw. But actually having a look, they are there. Most definitely there. And you can actually see some sculpted in teeth, although they are not painted on the top. While we can see on the V3 that there is in fact some actual sculpted teeth and are much more apparent because of the paint that is on there. It is worth noting, however, they're not individually sculpted nor painted. It's just one big slab of peach colored teeth. But however, the top does feature painted and sculpted individual rows of teeth, i.e., kind of varying in quality, but it does look good. The top of the head on the Evolved obviously has the standard three lines and a bit of a mismatched pupil, or I guess eyeball, that they couldn't even get applied correctly. And if you just look at it from head on, that is one of the derpiest faces I've seen in Godzilla history. And as for inside the mouth as well, it's entirely the same pink. The tongue is the same pink. The top of the gums is the same pink. The bottom of the jaw is the same pink. It's all the same pink. No variation. Three lines, kind of like eyeliner. There you go. However, there is a bit of variety on this one, as we have a bit of a banana tongue, very white, yellow colored. Also has some orange on the inside of the mouth, which is pretty sweet. The eyes are painted about the same, if not close to the same color as the tongue is, but also has a bit of like an orange kind of fade, almost like a gradient around the eye, which kind of creates like a glowing effect. And then the rest of the head is made from a kind of like a translucent orange ruby pink plastic that kind of has like a lot of dry brushing of black and orange to give it more of a fiery effect, as it should. While this one features kind of like a standard black charcoal plastic. Moving on down to the necks of both figures. Here we have a bit of like more variations where it's like much more yellowish orange, then goes to an orange, and then goes back to the crispy black orange mix. Well, this one has the pink, and then the spray kind of creates like a bit of a gradient back to the black, and then kind of have some like, I think these are like little metallic. I could be just bluffing, but these look like little metallic dry brushings, and then lines on the gills, which don't even like align properly. So that's about the heads and necks. Moving on down to the arms, here we can see that the Evolved Godzilla has definitely got a lot of like bit of dry brushing and details going on and really enhancing the sculpt. Of course, all the bumps and crevices you see, and the silver lining really helps to complement the much more darker kind of plastic used. versus the version 3, where it features a translucent plastic again, ruby red, kind of pinkish a little bit, but features some orange dry brushing and black highlights kind of on top of the scales versus the orange which is inside of the scales, and that is kind of more closer to what we saw in the movie. Also, like talking about the size of the body as well, bring the evolved in, we can kind of see like a bit of pink on the side and then kind of fades to the metallic. So I definitely like what they did with the evolution Godzilla or evolved Godzilla. And then here we have it's more of like the same dry brushing effect, black on the scales for highlights and the orange inside the scales, and then we have like the scales coming from the fins that look like it's like kind of powering up, which I definitely do appreciate and love about it. Moving on down to the legs here, we can definitely see that the well, obviously the bootleg has a lot more of the dry brushing highlights going on, especially like over here compared to the arms, where it's like all just down to the bottom of the feet, and it honestly brings out a lot of the great detail versus how it would look if it was just plain plastic. And the version 3 kind of does a similar thing again with the black and orange. However, kind of fades a little bit once we get from here to here and then to the leg. Which it or sorry, the foot, where it doesn't have too much of the black. You can still see some of the black, but it features a lot of like the ruby red and orange kind of color scheme, especially like when we get to this vein, which like kind of courses through, kind of splits off like a Y, if you were to flip it like upside down diagonally, and then you can kind of get all the way down here, and it just looks really good, especially with all that black and orange kind of seeping through together. Scrolling on down to the tails here, and we've got quite a bit of to talk about. Of course, we got the version 3, which has basically got the edge when it comes to like the color consistency and application, because it's got a lot more color here, not just with the fins, because it's mixing orange and yellow together, and it looks very chaotic and pretty erratic, which I do like because you got some like major kind of yellows and oranges, and then you got like the oranges from the body kind of like seeping through and highlighting some of that. And then you have the sides of it, which carry on from the body, black kind of highlights for the skin, and the orange kind of highlighting in betweens. And if you look at the bottom, more of the same thing. In fact, there's actually highlights to where the tail meets the sides of the tail. And then we get to the evolved Godzilla, and again, looks more like a pastry than it does like actual seeping power, because this just looks like strawberry icing on a cake. But as you can see, it's very pink. It mixes a lot of white. I see what they were trying to do, like accomplish that effect, but especially like here when it gets too cake, like this doesn't look like powered up. This looks more like bone. Like I feel like here they got a little too heavy-handed, and especially like within the gaps of it, it just doesn't look as refined as it should, even though it is a bootleg. And at the bottom here, we got some of the nice silver, although the pink does kind of bleed onto it, which is kind of a bummer, but say that be. But of course, both feature the same mold, so honestly, that's the tails. And finally, let's talk about the fins. The fins on V3, I've heckled them in the past before because they just kind of look off, because it's half red, which looks almost unpainted, then half orange, and then half yellow. I would chalk that down to an error, but all the fins are like that. Even where it's like right here, and it looks like where, well, hold on, where it looks like it almost just doesn't work, and then we have like a little bit of paint splotch. This is definitely a mistake, but I'll forgive it. But the inside fins just look so phenomenal. They have like a black kind of dry brush and then like a red. It's very hard to see, but they have like red on the interiors, which just look more like blood than anything. But it looks so cool that mixes with the yellow and the orange, especially like the yellow illuminating. I think that's they were kind of trying to, what they were trying to go for, but to me the fins just on the V3 just don't look as powerful as they should, but they definitely do connect the the veins pretty well. Meanwhile, the evolved bootleg Godzilla, definitely does not do that same effect. I will say this, like as far as the application itself goes, it might be a bit better than this. But that's all I can really say because it's still caked on. It looks more like a pastry than an actual energized, fired up Godzilla, which is the way it should look. Although again, the pink definitely is very shiny, so it gives off a nice shining effect. But really, it's all about your personal preference. So overall, for sculpt and paint, the V3 definitely has a lot of good qualities with minimal, I would say, minimal problems. That being maybe like the application itself of the spines aren't necessarily the best on some of them. But the especially like something with the evolved, it does try in a lot of areas, but also kind of gives up in a lot of others. So, but that's the general rundown of the sculpt and paint. Next, let's talk about poseability, the articulation. And I must stress that, again, these two are practically one and the same, although there is quite a few differences, but also similarities. Because these two are made of a much more, well, would you say, different, softer plastic compared to that of the original. There's quite a bit of similarities with that. But first, let's start with the jaw. On this one, I commented before that the jaw was loose. I fixed it. Yeah, I don't know why, but apparently I just now thought to do this. I took my fingers and I squeezed the jaw back into place, and so now I actually have an articulated jaw. The only trade-off is that it's really tight, and at a certain point it doesn't really open as far as like this guy's does. So it's more like the 2014's range of movement rather than the 2019's, but hey, at this point, who's going to argue? I have a movable jaw now that doesn't flop. Still no head movement because it's glued in. Still barely any neck movement. Again, mild wiggle, but that's literally all I can do. Here at the shoulders, we can actually go pretty much in and out, forward and back because they are on ball joints. So you can get a pretty fair amount of range with that. Doesn't feel like there's too much resistance. Well, it does appear to be like a little bit of stuckage right there. Hinges for the elbows, but I've already commented why they will not turn because the hinges are not applied correctly, so they will not swivel. That's the shoulder swiveling, not the elbow. And the wrists are not on ball joints or hinges, but rather just basic swivel. So you do lose a bit of swivels with the elbow and the movement with the wrist, but it's all fine and dandy at the end of the day. Moving on down to the waist, here we have a all right swivel. It's not like so much range you're gonna get out of. You can go like that far left, that far right, and you can't really get so much up and down, side to side. I mean, I imagine if you push it, you probably would either one, break it, or two, unlock more of the articulation, but I'm not risking the biscuit. Here we have an articulated hip, so you can kind of slide that in and out, forward and back real nicely. It probably works the same as the other one does, like a barbell style sliding ball joint. We got some nice hinges for the knees, but much like the wrists, or sorry, the elbows, you cannot swivel them all that much. It looks like you can here, but trust me, you can actually on this one, I do believe, but it's very risky because you also run the risk of breaking the hinge itself. It's like split apart. And a ball joint here at the ankle. And 10 segments for the tail. So very organic, soft movement. Although again, because of the way it's painted, you will see gaps. And it does kind of hold its pose, which is kind of shocking. It does droop a little bit, but I mean, that's kind of expected with these sort of tails. Now, something that version 3 has over version 2 is that it has way more head movement. It has the same type of joints, but the different plastic used, because it's translucent soft plastic, really one-ups both the original version and version 2. And I will even say this guy in a lot of ways, because for one, the jaw actually articulates like pretty flawlessly. There's no resistance to this thing whatsoever, but it's not like so overly loose. Here we have the head, which actually can go pretty far down, pretty far up, and can actually twist side to side and have a beautiful rotation. And the neck, this is what I mean by like, they really freed it up thanks to the addition of like the new plastic. Like you can get some pretty good rocker motion side to side, and it looks just overall really cool. And I could even get him to like rotate his head all the way to the side. Version 1 I think could do this, version 2 could not. Here we have the shoulders, so you can get a fair amount of range here. Pretty much the same thing as you would find on the other versions, except maybe a little more. Actual working hinges with swivels, and a swivel hinge wrist, so you can actually rotate it. Ball joints at the ab crunch, so you can kind of get a bit more of a crunch than you can with the original, and a much better fluid rotation, plus a bit of actual side to side. Nice rotations here at the hips. Again, same kind of application. You can kind of see more of that orange stuck in there. And you can actually get a pretty decent bend. It doesn't show it on a camera, but there you go. It almost feels like a ratchet, although I think it's just really tight. You can kind of get some nice rotation in there. And a pretty good ball joint here at the foot, although again, it is really tight. And the thing that, in my opinion, really sells the articulation is the tail. Outright beautiful movement. And unlike the Evolution Godzilla, they actually bothered to paint within the sockets. So it looks for a seamless look, although there's a ton of seams. But you can get a lot more range than you would with something like the version 1 or 2. Even, I think, the 2014, even when its bendy wire comes nowhere close to this. Actually, maybe it does. That might be a bit of an overstatement, but still, like the translucent, softer plastic really helps. The only thing is that it doesn't really hold its pose when it's posed straight up, so you can kind of like get a little bit of a limpage, but it's still very fluid movement. And I gotta say, this like steals the show regardless. So when it comes to size, you can automatically tell that one's a bit bigger than the other. However, proportionally, they're the exact same. The reason why one appears taller than the other is because he is actually a reissue that had his legs modified, so the socket placement is a bit different, and he's able to stand up a little taller. And I know this because I've seen some photos online of the original, specifically the prototype, and he was like really hunched compared to this. Like this is how hunched the original was. This one actually has its legs modified, so hey, who's going to necessarily argue with that? But as you can see here, the head here is looking much more downward compared to this one because, again, broken right out of the gate. I had to glue it, so essentially as far as size goes, they're the exact same. Next, let's go to accessories, and version 3 comes with nothing. Now, ideally, yes, version 2 did come with the atomic blast, and I think it would have been hard to replicate the nuclear pulse. But come on, why not like a decapitated Ghidorah head to put in his mouth? Or why not like something related to Mothra, like put the Mothra wings, like you can disattach maybe a dorsal fin and put on the big Mothra wings that replicate the pulse. If you see the Spiral Studios statue, you know what I'm talking about. But unfortunately, version 3 does not come with anything aside from translucent plastic, which you could argue that's a gimmick, but is it really? I'll let you decide for that. But this one, being a bootleg of the version 2, actually does come with a few accessories, specifically a heat ray and a bit of an impact base. And I've already covered this like several times, so I'm not going to cover it again. But basically the TLDR is this thing looks like a pink Q-tip, and this looks like an umbrella. There you go. Next, let's go over price. And I gotta say, it's pretty close, because retail price, there's really no retail price for him because he's a bootleg, and I bought him from AliExpress and I paid like $20 for this thing before shipping, around there. And I can't remember how much I paid for you. Maybe about $30 before taxes. Again, I can't exactly remember. But what I can say is that this guy is showing up practically like at a bunch of different prices, and an MSRP, even though he is discontinued, was about 20 to 25 bucks before taxes. So really, the price, if you can find him cheaper than him for whatever reason, I guess there you go. Next, I want to talk about availability. And this is actually where I want to bring an interesting point about him. See, he, again, like I said, is flooding AliExpress and eBay. Those are literally where you can find so many versions of this thing. I own one of the other versions without like the pink veins and whatnot, but I know that there's another one out there that has the pink veins, and there's a ton of different box styles you can choose from, like with the red box, the one that looks like him except it has the higher T.O.S.G promo art. There's just a ton of different variants of this thing floating around, so, and that ultimately leads to like different manufacturers and quality control, if there even is some for bootlegs like this. You might say, oh, there's no way to buy this thing aside from retail, right? Or sorry, outside of retail, right? As far as marketplace goes, right? Like secondhand marketplace stores. Hold the phone. Look in the link in the description. There is a website called costumes.com that's still selling this thing for $34.99. I don't know how much stock they have left, but it's probably low. So this is your chance to get one that's not a bootleg, unless you really want that beam. But that being said, that's literally the last remaining place, I believe, one of the last remaining, that actually sells for retail. So buy it if you want. And lastly, I want to talk about packaging, and I have the V3 box out here, but because both of them share like the same type of box, there's really not much to compare, although I have heard from reviews on AliExpress that this thing is not zip tied or packaged properly. And I mean, it's probably my fault for not like getting the box with it, but because of like how this is all bent up and this is all bent up and how this guy's head came snapped right out of the box, despite the fact that there was no box, it's subjective as to how it's protected. So again, you know, I gotta give the edge to him, but really it's all up to you. And so that brings us to the end of this figure comparison. At the end of the day, I definitely think that as far as like money's worth, you're getting more quality with the NECA release. Although if you do want some accessories, then I mean, you're just better off going with the version 2 of this guy. For resale, it's like about 30 to 50 bucks. 60 maybe at best. Assuming that they're not scalpers. Anywhere past that, you're greedy. Sorry. But really, it's all up to you. If you want something that'll actually like, you know, that actually is official, go with him. If you want something that's like a what if scenario if NECA had continued the license, go with him. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching this video. If you guys liked it, definitely subscribe to the channel. Believe in Jesus, accept him as Lord and Savior today. Spread the gospel. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, everyone.